Okay, hello everyone. So our topic for today in our photography class is about exposure triangle. So the exposure triangle basically is um, about these three important aspects or factors to consider on your settings in your digital camera, DSLR, or sometimes your phones with professional camera settings as well. So basically, you have to consider that a more advanced or um, an SLR, a DSLR, and other digital cameras has an advantage with this one with customizable settings and manual setting mode. So, at advantage kayo if you have these cameras. Okay, let's get to it. The exposure triangle composes of the aperture or what you see sa mga camera settings nyo with an F number, the shutter speed, which controls the timing of um, the camera to take a shot. So, parang ito yung pag-corrupt ng mga mata nyo. And the ISO, which is basically the digital or which controls the digital brightness of the shot you take. So, from these three factors, pinakamahalaga yung first two, yung aperture and shutter speed. Base support ang ISO because it gives a different detail na might be annoying to some and might be necessary to some shots. Okay, let's get through it. With the aperture, we have two things to consider. So, aperture basically gives the depth of field of a certain shot. So, yung depth of field na yun, imagine niyo ang isang picture frame in a top view or in a section. So, depende sa kapal nung or sa depth nung anong yon ng frame na yon, kumbaga yun yung sakop ng depth na yon is magiging sharper siya sa frame of shot. So, the higher the depth of field, the sharper the background and the main subject is. However, ang F number natin is baliktad. Okay? So, correction. So, tama yun. The higher the F number, the sharper, and the lower the F number, the more blurry the background is versus the subject that that is being focused and taken on. So, in order to produce a shallow depth of field with a good blurriness in the background, consider having f1.4 to 2.8 of an aperture, which gives you a wider aperture nga tinatawag. So, parang imagine niyo na yung aperture na yon gives you a different detail. So, kung mapapansin nyo, it is like an eye or an iris or pupil. So, dyan pumapasok yung light. So, basically, itong shaded area na to, ganyan kalaki yung light na ma-absorb niya. Kaya, kapag gumamit ka ng shallow depth of field, mas maraming light na pumapasok. Kaso, ang magiging kapalit nun, focus lang siya sa isang surface ng subject. Maganda to para sa isang detail shot or portrait shot or isang design element na gusto niya lang i-take na yun lang yung gusto niya pakita. So, yung attention mapupunta lang sa main subject. Unlike kapag gumamit tayo ng deep depth of field, yung parang pupil, yung iris, na yung pamapasok na light mas konti. So, this affects the whole settings. However, maganda to create or to give a feel with the subject and the environment sa isang setting. So, mapapakita mo yung buong scene, yung story between a subject and the scene, or kung ano nangyayari sa environment. And yun nga, the bigger the F number is, the smaller the iris that can be. So, basically, para lang nga mata, yun yung kabaliktaran niya. Big F number, smaller light that can pass through. Smaller number, the wider it is, so more light. So, yung deep depth of field can be produced starting from F4 and above. So, you have to experiment with that. Kasi depende pa rin yun sa distansya mo from the subject. And from that focus subject, yung distance niya from the background. It will always create a blurriness. So, ayan. Okay. So, with this aperture, yun nga, dahil nga it affects the light that comes or that passes sa sensor ng camera, it will create or it will force you to set a different settings. So, doon papasok si shutter speed and si ISO. So, ito muna, kay shutter speed tayo. So, sa shutter speed, ang purpose niya is to create a different approach sa mga nasa paligid ng subject. Kung gusto mo ba ng motion blur, or do you want to freeze the moment as yung scene na yon. So, the decisive moment nga na tinatawag. So, in order to produce a some blurry effects from the people or the environment sa mga movable or moving elements in a shot, you have to consider having the shutter speed 125th of a second and lower. So, in order to produce that blurriness that you want, you have to experiment. And yun nga, ang disadvantage nito, kapag handheld shots ka, may tendency na yung focus or kung saan ka nakafocus na subject, magiging blurred din siya kung shaky yung kamay mo. So, talo siya sa shaky hands. So, this will require you to have a tripod or proper stabilization on your means to take a shot. So, solution is tripod or any support. Next one, we have, if you want to freeze the moment, you have to consider 250th of a second to 400. So, this will surely freeze any moving subject and give a drama on the motion and emotion. With this one, you just have to make sure na nasa tamang pwesto yung subject or yung mga entourage to the main subject. But then, yung mga yung mga cameras natin, so yun, it can go beyond this. So, it may be 4,000th of a second to 8,000th of a second. Or sa mga ibang cameras yata, 16,000th of a second. So, basically, ang purpose ng nito is to stop light. Minsan kasi, for example, ang setting mo is tama na. For example, nag-set ka sinet mo yung camera mo manually, having an F4 aperture, then nasa broad daylight ka, and you want to stop the moment. So, pasok ka dito. So, F4 with 250th of a second. Then ang problem mo nga lang is gusto mo yung ganun kataas, ganun lang na settings, kaso hindi ka pwedeng or sobrang liwanag pa rin nung na-capture mo. You have to either taasan mo tong F number or taasan mo lalo yung shutter speed mo para maging tama yung timpla ng light. Yun yung tinatawag na overexposure kapag sobrang liwanag pa rin ng shot. And next na considered is kapag underexposed ka naman, ibig sabihin kulang yung light na pumapasok. Kaso wala kang mapalitan sa dalawa, you have to consider kung bababaan mo ba yung shutter speed or bababaan mo yung shallow depth of field. However, affected yung sharpness or yung focus subject versus sa environment. At doon pumapasok si ISO. So, ISO basically is like enhancement of the shot from the camera itself. So, parang settings niya sa camera na nagdadagdag siya ng light sa isang photo. However, ang disadvantage nito, nag-a-add to ng noise and grains sa photos na minsan nagiging pangit siyang tignan. So, you just have to consider if you want that noise or you can tolerate that noise in order to produce the proper settings you want to have your scene captured, or you want to lower your shutter speed in order to have your depth of field at its setting that you want and avoid the noise, or vice versa. Kung bababaan mo lalo yung depth of field para ma-freeze, para ma-retain mo yung shutter speed at a right setting. So, before ako magpakita ng mga sample shots, I will also discuss about the histogram. So, this is one of the most essential part na kailangan yung tinitignan lagi in order to determine if it's underexposed or overexposed. So, gagawa ko ng ibang graph. Okay. So, ang histogram, makikita nyo usually siya. It's like a graph na parang mountain. However, it gives you or it shows you yung light or yung lahat ng light and darkness sa isang photo. Okay, so yung sa leftmost part, leftmost signifies black, rightmost signifies white or light, and or the mid yan yung light tones, and mid section signifies gray or mid tones. Okay, so those mid tones are usually the one that we have to consider na tamang exposure. So, tinitingnan na natin to, minamata na natin to sa shot natin. Kasi minsan may gusto tayong gawin na gusto natin bright halos yung dun sa subject. However, nagiging overexposed yung background, or gusto naman natin minsan na yung light lang na nakakast dun sa subject, so nagiging dark yung photos. So, sometimes it will look like this. Mas mataas yung sa may left. This means na underexposed ang shot. Ibig sabihin madilim to. Kapag nag post process ka na tinatawag, yun nga yung nila Lightroom natin or in-edit na natin, kahit anong gawin mong editing dito sa mga dark portions na to, hindi na siya ganun ka effective, or it won't give much what do you call this? It won't give much detail. Ang isa naman is kapag overexposed, you will see the histogram na lahat focused sa right. Kapag overexposed naman, may tendency na hindi mo mare-recover masyado yung detail, or yun nga, hindi magiging maganda tignan. Yun yung parang sunog. Okay. So, ayan. Let's proceed with sample photos. Okay. So, we have here a shot of a theme park. So, yung lens na ginamit ko, meron lang siyang parang mga vignetting na tinatawag, or nag-cause siya ng mga dark and distorted like or blurry like corners. Pero with this one, in order to make sure na yung central part and some parts of the Ferris wheel itself is more detailed, so since maliwanag naman yung lugar, I'm able to stop or to freeze the motion. So, isang ko-consider mo kung paano ang motion ng subject itself. So, mabagal lang naman yung mga Ferris wheel. So, I'm able to have a shutter speed of a proper shutter speed to freeze the moment. However, I have to consider the aperture kung magiging sharp ba tignan yung kabuuan ng Ferris wheel. So, let's focus lang dun sa main subject. Then, since maliwanag yung paligid, I will have to make sure that the shutter speed is higher para hindi maging parang sunog yung subject and magkaroon ng tamang exposure of light from the subject. And since white siya, kapag makikita mo to sa histogram, more exposed siya sa right side. Then next one we have space shuttle decode at a vertical shot. So ayun, same lens na ginamit ko. Kaya meron siyang vignetting na tinatawag, itong black corners tsaka blurriness dahil dun sa lens mismo. May kind of fish eye effect siya. Anyways, so I have to freeze the moment dahil medyo mabilis to. And since broad daylight, mas madali kong ma-set at or mas madali ako makapag-shot na maliwanag pa rin or tamang aperture tsaka tamang shutter speed na hindi ko ginagalaw yung ISO. So, however, yung mga grainy parts na nakikita nyo yan dahil nasa post-processing yan, I just added it to create a film-like feel. Next one we have is, ayun, same lens. Meron siyang vignettes, meron siyang blurriness dahil parang fish eye nga, but then yung center, yung main subject. So, nag-focus ako dito sa mga bears. So, I have it at around F2 para magkaroon ng emphasis sa maraming display. Kasi kapag nag F1.8 ako or lower, it will only focus sa isang bear. However, I made sure na kita pa rin yung buong field na yan. Then, ang next shot is sa isang shore. So, I want everything to be seen na detailed. So, from the eave panels to the louvers, yung mga parang blinds or bintana nila na roll down, and the structural element. So, of course, kapag ito pala isang i-consider nyo, wag kayo, kapag nag-zoom kayo, most of the time, may kita nyo na magiging blurred ang ibang portions. However, it doesn't mean na ruined na yung photo. Meron talagang mga lens na sharp at the center but not as sharp as sa mga corners. So, ang goal nyo is to make sure na yung focused part nyo is sharp siya. So, another sample is this. So, as you can see, dahil sa interior space na to, medyo madilim siya in actual during daytime. Mga around 3 p.m. So, I had it at a lower shutter speed, around 100 of a second. Tapos, minmaintain ko yung ISO at 100 kasi yun yung default. Then, yung aperture ko, medyo mataas siya at f4 para mapakita ko yung detail nitong nasa background. So, medyo naging overexposed dito sa may left portion. However, properly exposed pa rin yung main subject. And kung makikita nyo, dahil gumagalaw tong tao na nakaupo dito, meron siyang konting blurriness. Next is this one. So, at a higher floor, windy kasi sa area na to dahil malapit siya sa seashore. So, I'm able to make the shutter speed higher and maintain a good depth of field para maging sharp halos. So, I was able to make sure that even though it's windy, na kuha pa rin na maayos yung mga light fixtures. So, again, ganun din dito. So, ito dahil gabi na, I have to maintain a light and mapapansin nyo nagiging grainy. So, yan na yung tinatawag na digital noise. Kapag tinaasan nyo yung ISO, magpo-produce siya ng ganyan. At most of the time, dahil nga kailangan mo mag-set ng tamang shutter speed, medyo magiging blurry na yung mga shots. So, another is this. Vertical shot from above. So, yan, may some of it is leading lines and some emphasis para sa composition. And also to make sure na detailed pa rin, I maintained a good aperture, added ISO. Pero yun nga, even though I added or I made the ISO higher, it didn't compromise the output. So, I was able to make sure na hindi ganun ka-disturbing yung noise. And to be honest, hindi nyo naman masyado papansinin yung noise na yon unless you were nitpicky. So, another sample shot of a freeze motion is this. So, it has some digital noise pero not much seen. And ayun nga, I have to consider na tama yung light and nakatulong yung light na nasa paligid. Then, even though yung roofing is not well defined, so ayan, yun ang digital noise. Even though it's not well defined, ang emphasis naman dito is yung parang covered area. So, a sample of focused or shallow depth of field. So, ayan. So, as you can see, focused siya sa face. Ayan, so focus siya sa face ng pet namin. So, but then yung background is very blurry. Meron kang idea sa environment pero mas titignan mo yung subject itself. So, ang difference doon or nagiging effect ng wider focal length is that yung relationship between the subject and the environment is kind of vague. But then with this one, medyo blurry siya or medyo wide yung focal length. However, I made sure na yung foreground and yung sa portion niya is scene para magkaroon ng idea sa space. So this is at around f4. Ito naman a shot in Makati, in BGC I mean. So I made sure na mataas ang shutter speed. So kung mapapansin nyo, freezed yung mga tao. However, yun nga, may blurriness dahil sa hindi enough yung aperture. However, I am not able to di ko maitaas pa masyado dahil magiging dark yung shot. And I don't want the ISO to affect it very much. Pero, ang kagandahan sa wider focal range is that hindi mo kailangan i-consider masyado na mababa or hindi ka forced gumamit ng mababang aperture. So, another sample shot. Then with this one, as you can see, dahil naka-stoplight from the subject to the environment, I was able to create a motion blur from the car that is passing. And since it is dark as well, medyo nakatulong para ma-maintain ko yung digital noise or ma-maintain ko yung proper shutter speed at settings. Ma-avoid ko yung digital noise. Then this one, ayun, gusto kong medyo stop yung motion. So this is at around 125 of a second. So, meron pa rin siyang konting blur or not much blur, pero as you can see from the dog. However, I was just avoiding too much noise. And this one is what you call a bulb shot. So, mga light trails. You are able to do this with a tripod and make sure na naka-timer yung camera nyo. Then, alam nyo yung tamang exposure. Tapos, stop down nyo yung light or yung shutter speed at up to 5 to 15 seconds. Tapos, yung aperture nyo, to make sure na sharp lahat ng nasa paligid, you can go higher, f12, f11, f12, ganyan to f16. And so, that is it. Then, with this one, some motion blur. I made sure to have enough parang magkaroon ng konting story dun sa mga passerby sa tulay. So it has a bit of a motion blur but definition on the arc. Then on a game, so another sample of a motion blur. So at right shutter speed, you'll be able to define or to create a story regarding it, or mapapakita niyo yung emotion ng mga tao. Then this one is freezed motion. So at a higher shutter